Hi, we're happy you're joining us today for the Inside Track on Real Estate by the Decker team, and I'm Yetta Decker.
And I'm Ken Decker, and together we make up part of the Decker team.
Exactly. Today we're so thrilled you joined us actually, and we're going to talk about commercial real estate. So for those of you that are not thinking about commercial real estate yet, I'd still encourage you to stay tuned because you just never know when that's an amazing investment opportunity for you. So today we're going to talk about the different types of commercial real estate, and Ken, who's sitting right next to me, happens to love the whole aspect of commercial and has taken a number of the commercial courses and has also done a fair bit of commercial leasing as well as ownership and business ownership, and that all fits in under the commercial sector. So he's going to do a lot of the talking today, but I like to ask him questions, so we'll get started. And so Ken, what is commercial real estate? How does it differ from residential? Let's start at the basics.
Okay. The basics are residential is your lifestyle. You're living there. It's your kind of usually your personality. It's an emotional decision. Commercial has a little bit about that, but it's mostly about the numbers.
Very little about that, really.
About what?
About the emotion.
Yeah. For someone that's an owner-occupied or they're holding their business there, there's that pride of ownership. You want a good location, it's about, that way in real estate it's the same. It's location, location, location. It's about feeling good if you're actually owner-occupying, that you want to have your business there. Clients like to come there to your business.
Like our little business in Manotick?
Yeah, we have a little cottage in Manotick that we work out of. And clients love to come here. It's on the water, it looks great, and it's comfortable, and it's all done up nicely.
And actually our clients can come and pick up a kayak or a canoe that's stored out back, and they can go for a little paddle down the creek. So that's, or the river, I guess. We're not really on a creek, but it's kind of shallow.
It's more like a creek this year. The water levels are quite low.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's some perks of and how you might be a little emotional around owner-occupied, because that's kind of what this is.
But typically it's about the numbers. If the numbers don't work in business, they don't do the deal.
Right.
And it's that simple. So there's different types. You could be, like we talked about, owner-occupied. That means you buy a building to operate your business out of, rather than rent from someone else and pay their mortgage.
Right.
So
pay your own.
You pay your own. And it's a way of developing value in your business equity along with the value of the actual business. Because many times, especially small businesses, the value is in the operator, not so much in the business. So when you're self-operating a business, a lot of your goodwill, so to speak, is the person that's doing that.
Right, it's attached to the actual individual.
Yes, and so if they retire, the business may stop operating.
Right.
Okay. Now, businesses also have assets, computers and furniture and
maybe
inventory
heavy equipment
and things like that, and that has a value in it as well. And so, while we're talking about businesses, the business valuation is a very tricky thing.
And it's very individual from the ownership of the commercial building.
Yes.
They're two totally separate entities. So
yes.
If you didn't want your commercial space anymore that you owned, you could either sell that with your business, and that's what you're saying is a little tricky to determine the value of, or you could simply close the business if there is no real value there.
Sell off the inventory or the equipment.
Right. And then sell the building. And so that's the big advantage in purchasing a property if you're a small business owner, is just like any other type of real estate, it, over the long run, goes up in value. And your cost of owning that building probably is no more than the cost of renting that building if you had simply not purchased and rather rented.
That's correct. Now,
or leased, I guess, is the right word when we're talking commercial generally.
Now, what happens many times when a business is starting up, they need their capital to do the business startup, and they don't have capital to put money down on a commercial building, which is going to require anywhere from 20 to 35% down payment on the commercial building.
Or even more, right? Could be 40
more.
or 45.
Depends on your history, your equity, and all those things. So what happens is most people starting out in a business will lease first. And then as their business has been in business for a number of years, they build up some some retained earnings in it, and they'll then slide into owning a building and build.
Right. So the big challenge
that
with
way.
owning isn't so much the cost of the building as it is just having the affordability, because you've got something else to do with your money when you first start.
Yes.
So that's the challenge. It's not
Yes.
so much your monthly cost, because the monthly outlay is probably similar.
Yes.
It's the initial investment.
And
money.
finding someone that's willing to loan you a mortgage on a building when you're fresh starting out as a business.
Right, because it's not quite the same equity position as a residential real estate.
Now, some people choose to lease forever and never own the actual buildings. And that's just a business decision because they put all their capital into growth of the business,
Right,
inventory,
the actual business rather
inventory
than
as opposed to
real estate.
real property. So the other type of person that owns commercial real estate is an investor.
Right. Well,
Now-
aren't you an investor if you own or occupy?
Well, no, you're owner occupying.
But I'm still investing in my own real estate.
Yes, technically you are.
So I'm doing both.
And yes,
So I'm kind of smart.
very smart.
Okay.
Yeah, you're very smart, Yetta. That's why I married
Thanks,
you.
Ken.
That's why you married me, because you're very smart. So
Okay.
the other advantage is sometimes when you buy an owner-occupied building, you may want to buy a building that's bigger than your existing needs. And when you do that, you then are able to lease out maybe another section of it. So if for instance, I need 5,000 square feet for my business in its existing state, but I think 5 to 10 years from now I might need 10,000, then I'm probably going to go look for a 10,000 square foot building and lease out
Right.
5,000 square feet.
So then
of it
I'm
for
really
5
an investor.
Yes, owner-occupier and an investor.
Right.
Which is like residential if you were buying a duplex and you lived in one side and rented out the other.
Right.
Same idea.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
It's very, very smart. Now, so there's some advantages to investing in commercial and some disadvantages over investing in residential rental
So
property.
now when we're talking investing, we're saying not owner-occupied plus investing to lease out a portion of it. We're talking just straight investing. We're
Yep.
not going to use it for our own business.
That's right.
We're simply going to purchase a building and we're going to lease it to others 100%.
Yes.
Okay.
And I've got some, you say, I've got some cash. Do I want to rent or buy, do I want to buy a commercial investment property or building that I can rent out, or could even be a piece of land that you rent out for a parking lot or whatever.
Right.
Do I want to do that, or do I want to deal with residential? And so they're two different birds, and some people prefer one or the other.
And so it really becomes personal preference, because the numbers, from a number, because you're a number guy, Ken, from a number perspective, they could be similar.
They could be. They could be. Commercial is interesting in that it has some differences, and I'll just go through a couple of those. One is rent. When you rent, it's typically triple net.
Okay. And what does triple net, Ken, mean?
I knew you would ask me
Ken,
that.
I guess. I can't even ask you the question. It's so confusing.
There you go.
So what does triple net mean?
Triple net means net of operating costs, maintenance costs, taxes, heat and hydro. That's net 4. That's 4 nets. But so what you're paying for is your rent is for the space you're occupying, and you pay extra for everything else.
Even taxes?
Even taxes.
But they're not my taxes.
In commercial, they are.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's where it differs quite a bit. And as an investor...
Because as a residential, just to sort of help people understand, if they've primarily thought about investing in residential, is typically when you're renting out or leasing out your residential property, taxes or condo fees, any additional, short of heat and hydro typically, is included in the rental amount.
Exactly.
So you're saying with commercial leasing,
Typically, it's not.
okay,
Now
and
there
that's
are
called triple net,
triple net.
even though it might be 4 net.
Yes.
Okay.
And there are also gross leases, which don't happen too often.
And what are gross leases? That sounds gross,
It does sound gross, doesn't it?
but it's not.
No, a gross lease means everything's included.
Okay.
All right. So, and then there's partial gross leases. It gets
which
pretty
means some
interesting.
things are included and some
things
things
aren't.
aren't. But it's whereas when we use the word triple net, we don't mean that there's only 3 extra things we're paying for. It really means you're paying for everything except the physical space.
Yep, the space you're renting, you're getting a certain amount of space. And this is the other thing that's interesting.
It's not all usable, is it?
No,
I know where this is going.
There's rentable and there's usable space. So if you're in a building that has columns and windows with window sills and that sort of thing, and you also have a common area, elevators and foyer and things like that, they're calculated so you have your rentable space. So it might be, for instance, the office we're in is around 4,200.
Not in Manotick here, not our Manotick cottage, but
our Antares branch
Antares location
is approximately 4,200 square feet of rentable space. That means I pay per square foot per year on my rentable space, but my actual usable square footage that I can put a chair or a desk on is about 3,800 square feet.
Okay, so you're losing, in our case, we're losing about 400 square feet.
The tenant is, but the landlord's going, yes, baby, because I'm getting paid for the columns and pillars that are holding up my building, and it all cost me money, right? I had to pay for it all, so I'm getting rent for all of it.
Right. So is there leases where you're not paying for rentable versus usable, or is it always that you pay for rentable versus usable?
Well, it really depends on the type of structure. If you're renting maybe a condominium that doesn't have really any support pillars in it or anything, it's a shell. You're renting 1,000 or 1,500 square feet, and it's just 2 walls going down and 2 back walls, and it's a square box. Well, they're both the same. Rentable and usable
similar.
would be very, very similar.
Okay.
Sometimes you might even get a bonus because they may, in a light industrial area, you may have a mezzanine that's because the ceiling height's 14 feet or 16 feet, and you might have there might be like
a little loft area.
A little loft area that's built in, and they could put some offices up there or something. Typically, you're not charged per square foot for that mezzanine. Now, if it's a true 2-story, then you're going to be charged for both
And
floors.
you could be either way.
You could be.
So it's like any other type of real estate. You really have to know what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And you
have
really
an
want
expert with you.
Right. You really want somebody with you that understands it. Mm-hmm. So you might want to take Ken with you.
You might want to.
Okay.
Take me with you if you want to buy or invest or lease commercial real estate.
Even lease, right? Because
Yes.
today we're talking more about owning and
Well, no, we're talking
investing in
about
real
leasing,
estate.
too.
Are we also talking about leasing?
Yeah, we're going to talk about leasing as well. That's what we've been talking about. And whether you're talking about leasing, you could talk about it from the side of the investor who now has
Right.
to rent it out and understand all these terms, or you could come at it from the side of the tenant who now wants to start up a business or has a business running and needs space. They need to understand the terms too. So both parties need to fully understand the terms that
Right.
they're dealing with.
So as an investor commercial client, what are some of the advantages? I think I took you off the inside track and took you on a back track.
Yeah.
So on the inside track of that, what are some of the reasons an investor might choose to do commercial investing versus residential investing?
Well, the one is the net rent. You pretty much know what your net rent's going to be, and that if any costs change other than your mortgage, because your mortgage is your responsibility, but the tenant's responsible for the taxes, the heat and the hydro, even things like
Condominium fees?
well, may or may not include that. That's variable. But things like the HVAC system, the heat ventilation system, if that needed to be replaced, you can actually amortize it and charge the tenant for the replacement of that over a period of time, and they're called CAM charges.
Nice.
Yeah,
Not so much.
Well,
if you're the guy leasing.
exactly, but nice
But if
for the
you're
owner.
the owner, it's awesome.
Yes,
So much more stable that way than residential leasing, whereas
you know what you're going to get.
if you need to replace an air conditioning unit,
Yeah.
or if the property taxes go up,
It's
you're
yours.
responsible.
That's right. Now, the owner is responsible. They got to put out the capital, so they have to have the cash flow to pay for that. But then they're going to recoup it over time in
Right.
the carrying charges, the CAM charges. Now, the other thing is a commercial lease is typically a long term, usually 5, 10, 15, even sometimes 20 years long. and they might have an option for a renewal. So smaller leases are typically 5 years, but sometimes a large company comes in. They need to know to bring their company there that they can rent for 10 years or 20 years or whatever. And sometimes government leases are like that, where they know they need that office building for 10 years, and they'll rent the whole thing for 10 years.
Right.
Okay, so long term is nice. You don't have to be switching tenants. Now, one of the things that gets tricky again is when you're renting long term, typically the tenant is required to pay for the fit up. Okay. And the fit up is called leasehold improvements. Could be you're putting in walls or divisions, or putting in suspended ceiling, or ceramic tile or carpeting on the floor, or whatever like that. And sometimes that's a negotiating piece, because the landlord knows that you're going to be in there long term, so they're willing to kick in a few dollars up front to help you
toward
pay for
that.
Sometimes we can negotiate a month or two free rent while you're doing that fit up or getting your business moved in. So there's lots of variables to deal with, and having a realtor that understands commercial, understands what you can ask for and what's reasonable and what the market rents are, is hugely important.
Because the market rents vary greatly, even from two buildings in a similar community, depending on exactly how they're positioned and what's available in them and all of that, right, Ken?
Yeah. Even the level of the CAM charges, like your extra charges, if for instance that's $16 or $20 for taxes, heat, hydro maintenance, and depreciation costs on the upgrades on the building, then you may not be able to charge quite as much for the base rent, because your other charges are very expensive and may put you non-competing with other buildings. So sometimes you have to drop your base rent. Or if these are low, you may be able to charge more base rent because you still compete well with other buildings. Okay. So there's a lot to deal with. And if you're just joining us, this is the Inside Track on Real Estate with Ken and Yetta Decker from the Decker team.
And we're talking today about commercial real estate, both ownership and leasing. So stay tuned. Lots of interesting stuff, even if you're not currently wanting to be in commercial ownership or leasing or investing. There is lots of really great tips, even from comparisons to residential. And
so there's different types of ownership of commercial as well, and that's been fairly recent changes. And when I say recent, like the last 10, 15 years. Used to be when you had a commercial building, you had a plot of land, you built your use building on it, put some parking in, and away you go. More recently, they've been doing condominium buildings.
That's right.
Which makes it a lot more affordable for the person, the mom-pop shops, the person that wants to open up a restaurant to support the commercial area, or the person that has a vacuum service cleaning company, or
or even a dentist, or any of the professional services, yes, as well, right?
Architects, because they can, mortgage brokers, real estate companies. Anybody who needs, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 square feet kind of thing, this works great for them. And you can actually, especially when the building's just being built and divided up, they're designed that usually in 1,000 square foot chunks. So if a person needs 2,000, they buy 2 units. If they need 4,000, they buy 4 units. If they need 1,000 square feet, they just buy the 1,000 square foot unit.
And they could vary in size. That's just an example of what's reasonably common
in the condominium.
In the newer style condominium.
Yeah. If you need 10 or 15 or 20 or 50,000 square feet, you're probably going to build your own building rather than go into a condominium situation.
And then you'll probably rent out part of it or lease out part of it, and now you're the owner again.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Of the whole thing.
Yes. Yeah. Right. So condominiums have found their niche in commercial.
They're doing really well in the city of Ottawa in particular.
Yeah, you'll spend anywhere between $100 to $400 a square foot for commercial condominium property. And again, the beauty is if you're owner-occupied, you're not paying lease payments to someone else. You're actually building equity to yourself.
Because they've gone up in value since they started.
Yes.
Yeah, they've done I think, as well, certainly as the residential sector.
The advantage for the owner is that they're not worrying about the maintenance of the exterior again, because it's condominium corporation. Someone else, a management company, looks after the parking lot and the exterior, and you're sharing all that with other owners. So the actual cost goes down compared to you looking after one building all by yourself. And if, say, you're in a multi-level condominium, you've got one roof, but all the units share the cost of maintaining that roof. So your cost can go down. Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. Now, we were talking about investing and renting and
leasing.
And leasing. Another, I'd say, a disadvantage of investing in commercial for renting out is the taxes are high. Not a problem when you have a tenant.
So if you've got vacancy,
it can be very expensive.
That can be difficult.
Yes.
So much higher risk for vacancies than in the residential sector.
Yes, because your taxes on a commercial building may be 3 times what they are on a residential property. So, if you're paying for a certain square footage, maybe $2,000 or $3,000 per month in taxes on a residential house, that zoned commercial would be in the $7,000 to $10,000 range. And so when it's vacant, that's a heavy expense. When it's occupied, the tenant pays it.
Right, generally speaking.
Yes.
Right.
And if it's a gross rent, it's going to be added in there anyways, because a gross rent per square foot is going to be a lot higher than a base rent per square foot.
So it's not really less expensive necessarily to the owner or to the tenant. It's just a different way of calculating it.
Yes. Tenants like gross rent because they don't have any surprises at the end of the year. Right. They know what their payments are going to be, irrespective of taxes going up or utility costs going up or the maintenance on the building.
So over the last bunch of years, we'll say 10, because we've been using 10, 15 around the commercial condo units. What has happened in terms of the quantity of gross rents versus triple net rents available?
There's much more triple net rent available.
Okay.
There's less risk to the landlord, more risk.
And demand is still pretty high in Ottawa.
Yeah, yeah.
For commercial space, if you want to rent it or lease it.
It's fair. There's availability, and there's it's kind of a balance. We did have a bit of a glut of commercial property in the West End. Again, the commercial market is micro. You have kind of your downtown. You have your other areas. You have light industrial, heavy industrial. You have office. There are many grades. There's general commercial. So there's all different types of commercial. So the other thing that is more important with commercial is you don't want to buy a commercial building or lease a commercial building unless you're absolutely sure that the zoning allows you to hold the business that you want to hold there.
Right. So what you're saying is certain types of businesses would not be allowable just because you say it's commercially zoned, it doesn't mean it's good for all commercial uses.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the last thing you want to do is rent something for 5 years, get into it, and find out the city says, no, you can't operate that type of business out of this location.
And could you then apply for a zoning change or what?
You could. It's tough, though, because the city doesn't like to change zoning. You might get an exception if you're close to the type.
Okay. But you're going to lose some time and lose some money.
There's even some general industrial areas that the city puts a maximum square footage that a particular type of business can be within that
Right,
area.
So even if it's okay zone-wise, you'd still want to check with the city and have guarantee that right now that type of business isn't overused or isn't overpopulating that area.
Yeah, so that there's ability for you to put your business in there. So the city's quite nice about this, actually. They will, you give them a written statement of the type of business that you're carrying on and what you're doing. then they will interpret what category that falls under, and then tell you whether you're allowed to be there or not. And they'll give you what's called a zoning compliance letter.
Okay.
You have to pay for it, by the way.
Oh, of course.
But they'll do it within 5 business days of the written request. And it just gives you that peace of mind that you can go ahead with a lease or a purchase of a particular property and know that you can operate your business.
So would that be the same letter you'd be looking at regardless of whether you were wanting to lease in a commercial area or whether you're wanting to purchase?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay, so there's no difference. So even somebody leasing, they have a lot of things to think about.
Yes. Yes. And now another side of, remember I said it was all about the numbers? So values on buildings are based on cap rates, called a capitalization rate. And I don't have time, or probably the people don't have the brain space for me to explain capitalization rate
Not without
today.
writing it down.
Yes, but certainly we can discuss that one-on-one when someone's interested in commercial real estate. It's just a different way of evaluating property. And another type of commercial real estate isn't really hard real estate. Remember I talked about selling a business?
Yes.
Yes, you can sell a business, and selling a business is kind of subjective. Again, there's some variables that we use to try and estimate the value of the business, and it's always based on income, on net income, and whether that net income is going up or down or stagnant.
So even what's happening within the business is not just about the numbers, it's about where the numbers are trending.
Yes.
So there's a lot of variables. And again, that word intricacies, when you're really working with determining the value in particular of something like a soft asset, like a business.
Yes, goodwill and that kind of thing. And then we have to add on to that inventory and machinery and that kind of thing.
And those are all depreciated.
Yes.
Because they're probably not brand new. And even if they are, once you've bought them, they're not new.
Mm-hmm. So that's exactly it. There's also, does the person that's there, when they leave, is their name part of the value, and can we transfer that to a new person? And so there's all kinds of subjective things on the value of a business. Different financing, you might use the business development bank. You might go to your regular bank. There's all kinds of things. But that's the end of our show, Yetta.
All right.
So we don't have much more time to talk about commercial real estate, although I'm very passionate about it. You've been listening to the Inside Track on Real Estate with Ken and Yetta Decker. And if you'd like to send in an email question, you can send that to deckerteam@chri.ca, or you can call us with it at 613-860-4663.
And if you need any help with commercial or residential real estate, certainly feel free to connect with us again at info@deckerteam.com or 613-860-4663. The number never changes.
We look forward to helping you and also meeting again on the next Inside Track on Real Estate.
Have a great day.